So Supergirl is over, which it's kind of hard to believe that that show is over, and I didn't really want to let the final go by without at least getting one video out to talk about it, because, you know, Supergirl has been a big show. I haven't made, like, as many consistent videos on Supergirl, especially this season, but in general, Supergirl has been a big show for me. It might not be my favourite Arrowverse show, it might not be my favourite comic book show, but I still think that the show has had a lot of good come from it, especially from the characters themselves. The show has added so much to, not just, I guess, the character of Supergirl, but just to the Arrowverse in general. I feel like that show has been incredibly impactful. And Melissa Benoist, she's just an amazing Supergirl. She really is a huge part of all these shows. And Stephen Amell as Oliver Queen, Grant Gustin as Barry Allen, and Melissa Benoist as Supergirl. They're going to be the three defining things in the Arrowverse for a long time for me, and I know for a lot of people as well. So I just really did want to talk about the show. But this isn't really going to be, I guess, a review just for the final. I kind of wanted this to be just a review, or just my thoughts on season 6, on the final season as a whole. Just kind of really informally, I guess, talk about how I felt about everything that happened this season, and just like overall my thoughts on it. On top of that though, I want to get a couple other videos out. The videos I'm thinking of doing is a video talking about the Arrow final, the Black Lightning final, and the Supergirl final, since there are 3 Arrowverse shows that have ended, and just kind of talk about what show I think did it better and what shows did what better. Like, not necessarily what is the best show of those finals, because it is very much dependent on what your favorite show was out of those 3. I feel like if Arrow was your favorite show, you're probably going to prefer the Arrow final over the Supergirl final, but if Supergirl was your favorite show, you're probably going to prefer the Supergirl final over the Arrow final. So I kind of just would like to do a video talking about what I personally think each show did best when it came to their finals. On top of that, I want to kind of do a season 6 ranking of Supergirl, The Flash, Legends of Tomorrow, and Arrow, since all of them have 6 seasons at this point. And also, when Armageddon starts this coming week, I do want to kind of get a video at least talking about the very first episode. I will try and do weekly reviews for it, because Armageddon's going to be the first time we're seeing quite a few Arrowverse characters come back. So I do want to at least kind of talk about them. Maybe it won't be weekly, but at least once the 5 episodes finish, or once the event finishes, I would like to do kind of a review of it and how I feel it stacks up compared to the other earlier crossovers. Really quick, before actually talking about the final and talking about Supergirl Season 6, I just want to ask if you can subscribe if you're not already. I make DC and Marvel videos as much as possible, and we're getting really close to 700 subscribers, so it would be awesome if we could hit that before like the end of the year even. But yeah, so Supergirl Season 6. Right off the bat, I just want to say that I honestly was pretty happy with the final episode, with the final 2 episodes, I guess, but the final especially. They got to bring a lot of characters back in a big way, and while some of the returning characters did feel a little bit like it came out of nowhere, I'm not talking about Cat Grant. I thought Cat Grant's return was actually the best return of all of the characters. I thought the way that they hid that she was returning and the way they weaved her into the plot was very, very, very well done. But characters like Jimmy, Mon-El, Winn, as much as I absolutely loved seeing them again, I do feel like they sort of came out of nowhere and then were gone again very quickly. Like, it didn't really feel like they were, I guess, seamlessly brought into the plot. It felt like they appeared and then were gone, especially Mon-El. I was very surprised how little he was in that episode. I was honestly expecting him to be in the final more than Jimmy or Winn, and I do really enjoy the character of Mon-El, but I thought that he especially sort of came out of nowhere and then was gone pretty immediately with no real, I guess, explanation for the things that he was like, for why he was here and whatnot. But that's fine. It was just kind of nice seeing him again, seeing a lot of the characters again. But I think that the fact that most of the final episode was devoted to more of an epilogue than actually the final battle was a very, very, very good choice. It's one of the reasons why I really like the Arrow final, is because the Arrow final is not about wrapping up the season's plotline. It's not about fighting a big bad. It's not about kind of really wrapping up the villain. The Arrow's final was an epilogue. It was to just spend a couple minutes with a lot of these characters for the last time, and that's what I got from the Supergirl final, and that's what I would have wanted, was to really spend just a last 40 minutes with a lot of these characters if we don't get to see some of them again, rather than really devoting the entire episode to fighting Nxly and Lex. So I really do appreciate that they did that, because it would have been a little bit unfortunate if like the final battle happened in minute 30 or minute 35 of the episode, and then we get like 10 minutes just to wrap up the characters. Like, that would have been really unfortunate. So serious props to the writers and the people working on the episode for doing that. In terms of the epilogue itself, I did think that it was really well done. I thought that they really managed to give all of the characters that were here one kind of last moment where we got to enjoy them. Now, obviously, we're going to see some of them again. I don't think that all of these characters have gone for good. In the case of Kyler Lee, she's going to be in The Flash either this week or one of the upcoming 5 weeks as Sentinel. So, like, she's going to be sticking around in the Arrowverse probably for a while. In terms of Melissa Benoist, I think we'll see her again eventually. It probably will be a while, though. But honestly, it's the characters like Katie McGrath's Lena Luthor, or I don't know, maybe David Harewood's John Jones, that I think we may not see again. For David Harewood, the reason I'm saying him is because he did put up a tweet pretty recently just talking about how this was the last time we'd see Martian Manhunter on television. He said that maybe some point down the line he'll suit up again, but his tweet did seem very final, so I would not be surprised if we never saw Martian Manhunter in the Arrowverse again, unfortunately. And with Katie, the reason I'm saying her is because she much more feels like somebody who kind of just wanted to be with the Supergirl casting crew. Like, yes, she appeared in Crisis on Infinite Earths, but she only appeared in the Supergirl episode. So I feel like Katie is one of the actresses on the show who, now that she doesn't have the Supergirl casting crew, she probably won't be too pressed to appear across the other shows, which is completely understandable. Whereas like people like Melissa and Kyler, they very much are friends with a lot of the people on the other shows. Like Melissa and Grant Gustin seem like they're just absolute best friends in real life and on the shows. So like for that reason alone, I think Melissa will love to come back because she's friends with so many of the actual cast members, whereas with some of the other people I'm not getting that. I do really hope that we get to see Brainiac 5 and Mon-El again at some point. They are two of the best characters to come out of Supergirl, and it'll be very unfortunate if we don't get to see them show up anywhere. I was really hoping that they would be moved to Legends of Tomorrow, but unfortunately Legends of Tomorrow doesn't really take characters from the other shows anymore, which if this was like season 2 or 3 Legends of Tomorrow, I could totally see Nia or Brainy showing up there. But on top of that, Supergirl is like the one Arrowverse show that in the last couple of years anyway that has not had any characters show up on Legends of Tomorrow, so I would love to see that at some point. In terms of how Kara's story ended with her revealing herself as Supergirl, I know a lot of people are taking issue with that, mainly because like the Supergirl 100th episode really showcased how bad of a thing that would be. But honestly, I love that decision. I think that is a really inspired choice. It gives all the other Arrowverse shows a really easy way to reference the Supergirl final, but on top of that, I just think that that's such a nice way for Kara's story to end on this show, like not in the Arrowverse, but on this show. I think that her just staring right at the camera, smiling, is a really, really, really good final shot, and showing that Kara is truly, truly happy with what she's doing. I think that that's amazing, especially since like it's a huge stark contrast to Arrow and Supergirl, where Arrow ended with like the main character dead, gone, and a lot of the other characters like mourning and crying like crazy over him, and everybody kind of just being all around pretty sad, whereas Supergirl kind of ended with more or less everyone being pretty happy and being pretty solid with where their lives are heading, and I really did like that. Plus, this feels like the end of a chapter and not the end of the show itself, which I know a lot of people are also taking issue with that. And if this was like, if we would never see these characters again, if this wasn't an Arrowverse show and this was just a normal show where when it ends you're likely never going to see these people again, if that was the case, okay, I can get a little bit annoyed at that, because it would be like, I would prefer something more final with it. But knowing that a lot of these characters will probably appear again someday makes me okay with that, because this really does just feel like we're wrapping up Supergirl as a show, but we're not wrapping up these characters, and I do like that. I think that they really are leaving the door open for a lot of these characters to appear in the future, should the actors and actresses choose to do so, and I think that is a really good choice. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. had a very similar ending, where more or less all the characters end with their endings very open-ended, so that if the MCU ever does come a-calling, all of these characters can appear. So I think that when you look at it like this, that this is really just a way to make sure that anybody who wants to appear again will appear again. I think it's a pretty good ending. Now, the season as a whole, I unfortunately do have a couple issues with. Well, I think that the final did wrap up things fairly well. I think the second half of the season kind of wasn't great. It's a big reason why I decided to stop kind of trying to review it weekly. Like, I know I stopped reviewing Stargirl weekly as well because college just got crazy, but I was kind of annoyed I wasn't able to review Stargirl, whereas with Supergirl I wasn't really too pushed to try and review. I wasn't really too bothered by the fact I couldn't review it, because personally I felt like a lot of the final episodes a lot of the episodes leading up to the final were way too similar. It felt like the plots of each episode were almost identical, whereas like the episode would start with Nxly finding out where one of the totems are. She would get to where the totem is, Team Supergirl would show up, or the Super Friends would show up, they would fight, Nxly would get away with the totem, then at the end of the episode they would fight again, this time Super Friends would win and they would get the totem. It felt like that happened maybe 3 or 4 times this season. It honestly felt a lot like The Flash season 4 to me, where in the back half of the season there were so many episodes that were repetitive and just kind of the same thing, whereas like in Flash season 4 we would have the Team Flash find one of the bus metas, they would fight the bus meta or whatever, or they would finally convince the bus meta to help them, and then Clifford DeVoe or the Thinker would show up and take the bus meta at the end of that episode. That happened like 10 times in the Flash season 4, and while it didn't happen that much in Supergirl season 6, I think that it did happen far too much. It happened to the point where it was getting very repetitive. There were a lot of little character moments, and I think that that's what a lot of the best parts of this season was surrounded with, like with Alex, Kelly and Esme, with Brainy and Nia, with Kara. There was a lot of great scenes with Kara and Jean. There was just a lot of great character moments and things like that, but I think the first half of the season was a lot better than the second half, and honestly I'm gonna have to rewatch the whole show. I am really in the mood to rewatch the whole show, and with the news that Lucy Lane is going to be appearing on Superman and Lois, I do want to force myself to rewatch Supergirl season 1, but honestly I think that at this moment Supergirl season 6 is probably my least favourite Supergirl season, just because I do think that it doesn't have a lot of these standout episodes that a lot of the other seasons have. Like season 5 for me had like a stretch of episodes in the back half with the Legion 2-parter, with the 100th, with Alex in Wonderland, that really were standout episodes to me, and I think that Supergirl season 6 just didn't really have a whole lot of those episodes other than the final and the prom 2-parter, and also maybe the episode with Diggle and where Kelly becomes Guardian. So that is a little bit unfortunate, because I do think that the season had a lot of potential, and while it did end very strong, I just think there's a lot of bits kind of bringing the episodes together that isn't very solid, and that's probably going to make it a little bit hard to rewatch in my opinion, which is kind of unfortunate. It's also the fact that that William Day and Andrea, they were 2 characters who just did not add a lot to this season at all. They were introduced last season and they just really did not have anything to do this season really. I know that Andrea, she was around a fair bit, and then William was around as well, but I feel like the only reason William was in this season was to give the characters a reason to be emotional in the final with his death. Whereas Andrea, I'm still not really sure what the point of her being in this season was. I honestly would have preferred something like they kept Kara as the current head of Catco, and then maybe when they brought Cat Grant back in, they could phase Kara out of that role. But I think that Andrea is a character that easily could have been dropped. Same with William. I think that he was just there to kind of give the main characters a push. But other than that, I think all the characters were great. I just think that the plot of the actual season wasn't entirely good. Nxly could have been a much better villain. Lex, as much as I like Lex Luthor, I think that this is their 3rd season in a row with him in a big bad role. It gets a little bit frustrating. I think that there could have been villains they could have done a lot better. Honestly, Overgirl, they brought her somewhat back for the final when they were bringing all the old villains back in a way, through the All Totem stuff, but I think that honestly Overgirl could have made a pretty solid villain, since we know that her Earth is likely back, Earth X is likely back because the multiverse was restored, so it would have been fairly easy to have, Overgirl returns on Earth X, she somehow has the memories of the old multiverse, so she remembers the fact that she died, that her Oliver died, and all that during the events of Crisis on Earth X, so she somehow figures out how to get to Earth 30, or not 38, sorry, I'm getting confused with old Supergirl. She somehow figures out how to get back to Earth Prime, and she comes back all vengeful and is your whole team ended up being the reason why we died on the other continuity, or in the other universe, so I want revenge, I want to fight back. And yeah, you could argue that could be somewhat of a rehash of Red Daughter with season 4, but I think had it been handled well, it would have been really good. But that's just my opinion. I think that the final was very solid. I think Supergirl has had a good final, so that is something that is awesome. I just think that the final season as a whole isn't near as solid as it could have been. It also didn't feel like it was near of a celebration of the show's history as Arrow did with their final season. But how do you feel about Supergirl's final season? How do you feel about its final episode? And if you enjoyed the video, please remember to like, share, subscribe, and all of that. And I hope you have an awesome day.